Good evening, I'm Margie O'Leary. We're here for the April 4th, 2022 Audit Committee meeting. We have a pretty light agenda for the evening. First item is review of the minutes from our February 7th, 2022 meeting. The minutes were included with materials that were circulated before the meeting.
Sorry.
Okay. Anyone have questions or comments on the minutes? Great. Okay, next up is our claims auditor reports. We have Francine here with us. Anything you'd like to report on?
We're looking really good since the last meeting in February. We only had two exceptions with minimal dollar amounts. We had two emergencies, the high school boiler and Boston cooler. And other than that, I did have some notes listed, but we have resolved some of them. Some issues that weren't exceptions. I think we're looking good.
Yeah, I agree. I looked at it as two exceptions for like
Yeah.
$80.
You're right.
You know, minimal
Right.
stuff. And just comparing the summary that you included from year over year,
Okay.
we've made a lot of progress in terms of reducing the number of exceptions as well as the dollar value. So, I think it's good news all around. Next up, we have the function level summary document. Jim, you want to go over that?
Yes, so the function level document is, as it has been in the past, it shows what was budgeted for the current year, what the actual expenses are for the current year so far, up to 329 in this case, and what the expense plus the encumbrance amounts are, which is a gauge for how much we think the total will be spent. As you can see, we're in good shape. 24.6. My estimate for the end of the year that we'll get to later is right around 25, but I think we will spend. And the major difference between that number and what our budget was, 26.9, is the 1.1 million in federal funds that we had. So those are accounted for in the F fund rather than the general fund, so that makes that difference right there. As far as a question that came in, as far as looking at current year and budget versus what our expenses are, I can certainly go through that. Most of them are changes for either rates on ERS, TRS, or salary changes, or positions that have changed over, which would cause one-time expenses rather than unusual for the year. Happy to go over any one of the functions that looked odd to anyone. Happy to go through that, address them.
Tricia, did you have specific questions?
I guess I wasn't aware of the federal fund. Is that balance a lot larger than most years?
Well, the federal fund is over in a totally different fund, and that's 1.1 million in expenses that came off the general fund. So if you add the 25, I think we're going to spend plus that 1.1, we'd be about 26.1, as opposed to the 26.9 that was the actual budget.
And how does that compare to the 24.6?
The 24.6 is the actual expenses.
Right.
Our total projection is 25 that's going to be spent in the general fund. So the federal funds, the federal money is on both sides. So if you take out that 1.1 on both sides, the budget would be 25.8 for revenue, 25.8 for expenses. So if you compare that to the 25 that we're actually going to expend, it's within that normal range, that 3%, that 2.5% that I talked about.
So we'd like to have a cushion so we don't spend every dollar we have.
You have to because it's a hard cap. So yeah.
Jim, I see in maintenance of plant.
Yep.
There's a big jump there. What's going on there?
So those are in the budget for next year. Those are the 325,000 worth of items that we put in for deferred maintenance. So that's the significant jump there.
So Tim, your question is from the projection for this
Not
year.
to say a
for next.
projection for next year.
Yeah.
Jumping ahead.
No, you're good. Okay. Anyone else have questions about this summary document? Okay, good. All right, next up, we have the January, February school lunch profit and loss. Robin, are you still doing this, or you're off the books?
I'm here for moral support.
Much appreciated.
Okay.
Can you tell me your name?
I'm sorry, it's Christy Reidenberg.
Okay, nice to meet you, Christy.
You too. So I'm gonna go over January and February school lunch fund. So in January of 2021, we lost like $10,000, and in January of 2022, we gained $25,000. And in February of 2021, we lost $6,100, and in February of 2022, we gained $16,000. Reimbursements for meals is driving our revenues, and all the expenses other than food are staying consistent. And as of February, year to date, we are up 55,000, leaving us with a fund balance of 103.8. Claims continue to be up because of free type A meals. And next year, our only concern is the free type A program continuing.
Right, so anyone have an update on that? I know the
I
governor
do.
included it in her budget.
So it's included within the budget, 5 million, but it's also coming from the feds. So it really depends on what the feds do. And there right now, we don't know what's going to happen. So it's there. If they say yes, go ahead. Hopefully it will change. Right now, anything that's holding the budget up, it doesn't involve anything with school. So if the feds say yes and then it goes through, then yep, we'll have it. If not, no. And we weren't eligible prior to this, so schools that were eligible will still be eligible to get it, but schools similar to ours will not be. So it's kind of cracked at this point.
I've heard that it's not being looked on favorably for women.
I heard the same at the federal level.
Yes, federal.
Yes.
All right, fingers crossed. Yeah, I think there's been a big uptick too, I think, in breakfast. Since we talked about it, it looks like a lot more students are getting breakfast, which is great.
Anyone who wants one.
Yeah. My son has been asking me to school 7:15 every day so that he can get breakfast. So it must be good.
So it depends on if they're getting the Pop-Tarts or if they're getting the egg sandwiches, because the egg sandwiches are like.
I would guess egg sandwich, but people not disclose.
Is that a benefit extended to the Board of Education?
They're delicious and mine cost $3 a pop. So
All right, so thank you, Christy. Next up, we have discussion on the pilots. I know we have some, a pilot to be approved on the regular board meeting agenda. I wanted to put it on our agenda just so everybody was clear on the different pilots that are in play and what the impact is on the budget, if any.
we have a couple.
Yep.
So we have 2 that are in our control and 1 that kinda is, which I mentioned in our news and notes and not. So Jim, do you want to explain them all and then we can go from there?
Okay, short version. The power transmission lines is the one that's kind of in our control, but kind of not. The Albany County IDA is handling the pilot for that for all 11 municipalities that are included, 4 school districts, 4 towns, 2 villages, and the county. So what it is they're proposing a 30-year pilot that has a 2% escalator. And it depends on the number of miles within your municipality and your tax rate, what portion you get. Our district is scheduled to get about 1/6. Ravenna is scheduled to get about 1/3. So together we make up about half of the total pilot. One of the items that has come up is that it does have an initial hit on your first year of the pilot to your tax cap. So
How does that work? How does that work?
So when you're doing the tax cap calculation, On both sides, you have pilots. You have pilots you're gonna receive in the upcoming year that you have to subtract out, and pilots that you received in the prior year that you have to add in. So when there's only one thing that you subtract out, that's what affects your tax cap in that first year. Going forward, it's on both sides, so it really doesn't have an impact.
But if it's a large amount of money coming in, so if it's like 30,000, it's not gonna really impact us so much. If it's 500,000, 600,000 that first year, then that's where you're gonna have a negative impact on your tax cap. So you could be at 0, or you could even have a negative tax cap.
So in this case, they're talking about having a separate agreement that carves off about 20% of the money into a host community agreement, which can be treated as regular general funds. They're not treated as tax funds.
So I've done these before. You can set them up in a lot of different ways. It's not one ever this large, but this community host agreement then can go into your general fund. You can use it for other things that you can have, such as beautification. You can use it for really anything, which is in your general fund, but it doesn't impact your tax cap in the way that your pilot would. So it's the most beneficial for us in Ravenna, since we have such large amounts. I mean, 1.2 million, after 30 years, it's like 1.4 for us, Jim?
1.1.
1.1. Ravenna's 1.4, right?
Ravenna's about 2.2.
That's it. So, but for us, Gilderland and Bethlehem are much smaller. So they're thinking about also doing the community host agreement, but it doesn't impact them in the same way it would us, since we have such a larger impact on it. It's really, that's the only control we have. We don't have control over the pilot. The IDA is doing that. So they're negotiating the pilot, they're gonna do it. We don't approve the pilot, we don't have anything to do with it. The community host agreement is the only thing that we would have control over. And that's if we negotiate that with them as a group of schools and says, yes, this is something we want to do with you. Can you please look into it?
And that we have to negotiate directly with the.
No, the IDA negotiates it on our behalf. We're telling them we'd like it in there. That's basically what it is.
And is this one a realistic one? Like this is
gonna happen.
This one is gonna happen.
It's going to
There have been
happen.
pilots before where it's many years out and like when it's one that is just not.
So everything states right now that it's going to happen.
Is this the power lines that they've been
Yes.
putting in?
Yeah.
No, so that's.
No, not the ones that they're putting
No,
in. It's-
this
No,
is
it's
different
different
down
channels.
from Montreal down to New York City.
Yeah.
Okay. So it hasn't yet.
No,
No.
this won't happen for another 4 or 5 years
Okay.
if it's going
So
to
it's
come to
still-
fruition. But
These
this,
are underground lines, right?
Along the railroad tracks, yeah, underground ones.
we believe this one it's got a lot of steam. So I believe this one's going to go through. This is one that's going to have the most impact on us.
Why would the IDA or this organization, the vendor, agree to a community host?
It doesn't have any impact on them. I mean, this has impact on us. So it's just another way to divvy up the money that they would be having to divvy up anyways.
They gotta pay this money out anyway. How we receive it, community host agreement is beneficial to the
Correct.
pilot.
Yep.
In the first year, yes.
In the first year.
And it's beneficial going forward, you get the same amount, but the impact is in that first year.
And the concern on the tax cap is if we have a 0 increase in the next year, we're capped and all that money's subtracted.
So what we've tried to do with the community host agreement is bring it down to the level of our growth in property values, so that basically offsets, and we just go with the CPI, whatever.
So
Yep.
this wouldn't actually impact us probably to 3 to 4 years from now, but you have to start the conversations now.
And when you say it goes into the general fund, is there any restriction on how that gets used at all?
No.
So
Not
it
unless
could go
we
to
put one
salary
on
or chalk or whatever we're
Right,
using.
unless, like Jim said, unless you put a restriction on, well, unless you say it's only for beautification, or unless it's only for facility maintenance. If you target it, then yes. If you only say it's general fund, which would be my recommendation and Jim's recommendation, then you can use it for anything.
And no one else has a say over where, right, so it's not like the power plant.
Nope.
No. Thank you.
Yeah, they have no control, all they have is money.
Yeah.
They give money and then all of this can get negotiated out.
Where are these lines going?
Right along the railroad tracks, down from Montreal all the way down to New York City. So they have to pass through so many municipalities, they're working county by county by county.
This doesn't
We'd be
impact
blind
it
to
because, yeah, and if there's a transfer center, which there was a conversation at one point.
Yeah.
And we got that taken out of this pilot because we said, no, we want them separate. If there were to be a transfer center, we would get even a larger portion because that would be within our area.
It's gonna be,
So if that comes back, that's another part of this that we would see.
That's not gonna happen.
At the moment, no, but we don't know if that's gonna come back.
They're planning to locate the transfer center elsewhere.
it was planned to be here.
Yeah,
right?
but then they
now
took it
it's
out.
not,
Right.
so we.
You never know.
How many years is this money available?
30 years?
But then the pilot that we have on the agenda for tonight is.
So that's a different one. So let's, are we ready to go those two?
Sure.
All right, so we talked about this about a year and a half ago when we got the notifications of the solar projects coming up, and it's real tax property law. They come out, they say they're gonna do this, and you have the right to be able to say that you want a pilot or not. We approve the fact to go out for a pilot and say, no, we'd be interested in doing a pilot. So the pilot that's on for tonight, these are smaller impact pilots, but as Jim will tell you, we're actually seeing the increase each year from, Jim can explain how much it actually gets more revenue to have the pilot. The impact on the tax cap is minute on these, but it's kind of the same. So Jim, you want to talk about those? And this is the one that, let's just talk about the one tonight because we haven't
Right.
negotiated.
So the initial payment that they've come up with for this first smaller project is 5 megawatt solar is 24,000 starting, and then it'll go up 2% every year from there.
And they usually pay it by megawatt price, and the price that they gave us for megawatt is actually better than what market value is right now. So that was kind of nice to see that.
Better, not for the payer.
Better for us.
Right, so it's,
Yeah.
okay, higher than.
Yeah, higher for us.
The market is about 5,000
What
per
is it paying
megawatt,
for?
they're paying 6,
Yeah.
so to give you the idea. So this agreement, the first year would have an impact, but that impact is $24,000, which is 0.1% of our tax levy. So not a significant piece, and that would impact next year, not this year.
Yeah, because when we do the tax cap, it's known pilots at the time. Since we didn't know of what that pilot would be, it doesn't count for this year, so it's next year's tax.
And that agreement that we have in place has the escalator, whereas the taxes, again, we talked about the tax rate going up by less than 1%. If you have an escalator, it's generally going up higher than the tax rate. So it's going to get closer and closer and closer and closer to the value that that property actually has before it falls off the pilot and becomes fully taxed.
And Jim, what was it that we currently are getting off of that? Was it like
It
60?
was $27,000 over the 15 years.
Right.
So we're almost getting the same amount in the very first year by agreeing to this pilot.
So we're getting more revenue by having the pilot than we would have.
By us taking action.
Mhm.
This pilot's gonna go through no matter what, but by us taking action, we're agreeing to participate.
No, this pilot is ours. So this pilot
Okay.
is the one that, when they're smaller pilots like this, with control of the school district.
Okay.
So we followed the law on this. We said, nope, we'd be interested in the pilot. We went back, we've negotiated the pilot. Now the pilot's here to the board. If the board says no, then we lose out on that pilot. That pilot's gone, and we're back to the
That
27,000.
project may still go.
Oh, that project
We
will
just
still
don't
go
get any
through.
money.
Correct.
Got it.
We'll get whatever we get through the tax.
Yeah, which would be the
Because we added-
27,000 over.
Be added to the tax roll.
Yeah.
The part I like about the agreement is the escalator for if they increase the megawatt, whatever their production is. But how do we monitor that?
It's monitored by them and legal. They do that on that.
Honor system,
Honor system?
found letter.
I'm
That's
sure
my
we could
question.
request information
Yeah.
to make sure. I mean, that shouldn't be an issue.
But that's something that they govern. I mean, that's all part of their laws, I believe.
Who's the they?
The company,
Who is this company?
Borrego.
Great.
And where is this one?
It
just says on House Mountain Road. I
I
didn't
think
see
it's
an
right
Yes.
on the way to any ladder.
address.
Yeah. After Sella. Well, not for Sella, we're by the Borrego.
Okay, so that's 2 out of 3.
And then the other one,
Is Cipriani Solar, which will be very similar to Borrego once they
and I don't know what
finish
that
up
is.
their work.
Where's that one?
I don't know.
Negotiable.
There's an industrial area in town of Gilderwood.
Oh, is that the one that it
Yeah,
is?
that's the one.
Over
Yes,
by-
the library.
Yeah, down like 158.
But we don't have control if they go in or not.
Like phones.
We just have control over pilots.
And the third one, any idea on the timing on that one?
They haven't reached out to negotiate yet, so.
Okay. Anybody else have questions on the pilots? Thank you, Jim. Okay, last up, we have any questions on the budget for next year? We have the approval of the budget during our regular board meeting. Can we approve it later on?
Sorry, I think we skipped
Did I skip
fiscal
one?
year end reserves.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yep.
No, I just
But
wanted,
Rachel's gonna ask a question. You're asking if we can approve it without having the state budget? Yes, you can.
Contingent?
No, you can just approve it because right now, as it stands, nothing's really gonna change of the state runs. This isn't where it's going to be. Like, everything that has been shown to us is going to be there. If something changes later, we can always make a change because it's April 24th. I believe we have to make the change by. But everyone we've talked to that I know, they're approving it now because there's nothing slated to change on the school. The runs are the runs that we have. The BOCES aids or the expense-based aids are all estimates that we've worked with already. So we're in really sound shape to be able.
Wasn't today some public notice deadline?
So they got the extender. So it's been extended now until April 7th. And I can tell you exactly what's holding it up if you'd like, because Jim and I were just talking about it.
It's a mishmash of issues.
Yeah, so it's the 421A housing reforms, possible gas tax holiday, alcohol to go, and
reform.
discovery reform.
Bail reform.
Oh,
Yeah,
bills.
discovery.
Oh, bail reform.
That's what you have to put the bills state.
Just a little stuff.
Yeah.
So.
That one's not there.
No.
This one, they didn't put it in the email. But
And there's also blow up over the Bill Stadium. which-
Well, yeah, that's what I just said, the Bill Stadium, yeah.
But the school bills and the school runs are pretty much solid.
Have they finalized any bills yet?
So we were hoping the educational bills would be done by Sunday. I have not. We were anticipating educational bills by Sunday and we haven't seen it. So nothing at this point.
Any other questions on the budget before we go to the one I skipped, item 4? All right, Jim, go ahead.
okay, so this is our initial look at year end. Of course, subject to change, I will say that every single time. Our total revenues are coming in at about 26 million. So if you add the 1.1 in federal funds, we're bang on with what the number is, 26.9 to 27.1, very little difference there. Estimated total expenses of about 25 million, giving us a $1 million surplus that I have suggested that we distribute into the areas noted below under increases. Capital project, of course, as we're moving forward to try to get to the point where we can do the elementary school and transportation. Tax certiorari, we took care of one of them. That's the decrease that's shown there. The assigned unappropriated fund balance is the encumbrances at the end of every year where you have leftover POs that you just hold on to that you pay. We've received the items, we have to pay for them in the new year. It clears out at the end of the year, then we add in whatever the new, I just threw in 100,000, which is roughly what we have every year. The assigned appropriated fund balance is our amount, the 2.5% that I've suggested we put in there, which is basically our buffer. And then bringing the unassigned unappropriated fund balance, which is limited to 4%, up to the exact 4%. So those are the changes recommended. Net result, you can see, comes down to about 7.1 million, 6.1 million, so that's $1 million difference. Happy to answer any questions or take any comments.
So Jim, the allocated to offset tax levy, what does that mean?
So the assigned appropriated fund balance is specifically an offset to tax levy. And that's the definition of it when you put the money in that account. So technically an offset but it's, never really used that way. It's used as your buffer.
Keep the tax levy down.
Right, okay. Got it. So we rewrite at the cap for the unallocated.
Correct, the 4% cap,
4%.
exactly the amount there. And the 500,000 for the capital reserve is the limit on the amount we can put in the capital reserve as it is. Just if you're wondering why that number is there.
So does this have to be a new reserve? Right,
No,
like we can't add,
That's the existing reserve, and I believe it was approved up to 10 million,
okay, good.
so that it has no other cap other than that 10 million.
Got it, okay. So we can just keep adding to that every year.
Yep.
Until we're ready to do the projects. All right, questions? Thank you. Okay, well, that concludes
Oh,
our
Archie,
agenda.
we got one more.
One
So
question?
it was brought up, there's a question at the last board meeting, and then more questions regarding the athletic fund balance. So Jim put up a summary of expenses for the athletic function over 6 years and 2 budgeted, that was sent out to the board. And so you can kind of see where everything's spent and how it's allocated and divvied up in regards to, as a whole. It's not set down to what groups go where and who gets what. I know that's a question that's been asked about, how it goes to each sport. So kind of just need to understand what the board would like to see in a report regarding athletics. So Jim and I and Mr. Sapienza can work on specifics that the board would like to understand about.
So Trish, you asked the question.
Yeah.
How do you want to see the data presented?
I guess my overall thought was, how do we make sure, I'm just gonna use the word equity, probably a better word, but how do we ensure we have equity between, for Title IX, so boys, girls,
Compliance.
equity?
So are you asking what the procedures are, or are you asking for specifics of our funds and then showing how it's equitable?
Well,
Because those are two different, that's what
well, right now, I'm not even sure, like, what is our process, like, how do you guys do it? How does Joe, like, does he have a report he looks at? How do we ensure, besides, I'm sure with individual decisions, he probably contemplates, but collectively, when you look at it, how does he look at that and make sure that we are in a good space?
Well, it's more than just Title IX, I'm correct in saying
Yeah.
it's equity for all sports, making sure football gets what they need, lacrosse gets what they need, girls lacrosse gets what they need, softball gets what they need.
There
Yeah,
could be many
right.
dimensions to it. Yeah,
Okay.
my immediate thought was just based
Yeah.
off of.
Is there a concern that there's currently an issue with Title
I
IX?
have no concerns. Well, I hope I don't.
Well, I want to ask and
Yeah,
make
I
sure if
don't-
there's specifically
I
something
don't know
that we
how
need
I
to
would
look for.
know. I mean, we got a good chance to look at just the participation numbers, which is definitely a facet of it, right? And that looks pretty good,
Yeah.
50-50.
We've actually spent more on girls this year, which would be an inequity the other way if you were doing like
Yeah.
yearly. So that's my question though, that Jim and I were talking about. How many years do you want this compiled information for? Because if we're looking at it from 2 years in comparison to 5 years of back data, so we're trying to get a better
Yeah.
understanding of how we can, it's kind of daunting, and Jim and I were trying to figure this out. We just need to understand the scope of what we need to look at. If we do now, and we say, how are we doing it with our procedures, and then we use this year and last year as a base, that's a kind of doable thing I think we can do. I just wasn't sure how far
I
we
mean,
go.
how does he do it now? How does he make sure we're,
Well, there's a lot that goes into it, so I don't want to say something that I haven't spoken to Mr. Sapienza. I know my components in that and know Jim's component, but I'd rather not speak to it until we have an understanding.
In each sport, regardless of if they're female or male, can cost a lot more per player than another, like say soccer and their uniform compared to a football helmet and the requirements of how many referees are at those games.
Or when the
cost.
uniforms are up or when they're not in comparison to.
but I think you're still technically kind of required to spend equal amounts. So if football is 10 times
I
as
don't know,
expensive,
I'm
You're
not
not
an
required-
expert,
you're
but
not
I don't
required to
think
spend
that's.
not
true.
required.
I don't think.
Okay, I guess we should step back and say, what is our district goal? Like, what do we want to achieve for? I'm not saying I know what the rules are. I thought I was asking a very simple question.
Oh, it's
Making
not simple.
sure, because I just remember like I don't even know if it was 10 years ago, 7 years ago. It got way out of whack and the community got really upset. So when you presented those numbers, it got me thinking, like, how do we look at this every year? And that's all I was asking.
Well, this is helpful then. So my recommendation is going to be given a current 2-year spending track of where we are. So then we can justify, because what I don't want to do is I don't want to say, here's what we do, and then not have the justification of it.
Uh-huh.
So I'd rather have both, the process and the justification behind the process. And I'd rather go for 2 years and then a projected spending for next year.
And the only,
Does that work?
Oh, I'll definitely take a look. I don't want you to
2
get,
years,
like,
because you've been here 2 years.
I wouldn't want you to
Sorry,
get
I
too
couldn't-
narrow where like one big expense for one group throws it all off. I'm sure there's gotta be some averaging.
Well, that's going to be the issue. That's why you
Yeah.
have to look at over a period of years, because,
Yeah.
you know, at the end of last year, what was it, Jim, 25,000?
20,000.
20,000 on girls' uniforms?
But yeah,
Yeah, so I
I
mean,
imagine
that would
there's gonna
definitely
be
throw it
some-
off whack.
right.
And that was to upsize and upright just the replacement schedules that we had to develop.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
So
That's what I
what's the
think.
cycle for replacement?
right,
Exactly,
exactly.
When was the
That's-
last
So
one?
that's what I have. So we've created a new replacement cycle, so that's kind of where, that's, to me, that's the equity behind it, is having very consistent replacement cycles, making sure that, you know,
rather than cost.
right, rather than the cost of making sure the fields are up to where they need to be,
Right.
you know, on both ends, right? So I can do that. Kind of look at 2 years, give me enough estimate, do the procedures. Jim, what are you thinking?
I think 2 years is reasonable. We can look at that.
And then project it.
And I think, I mean, Title IX and equity stuff aside, I think it may be interesting to look at that data anyway.
Yeah.
In terms of, right, is there anything we as a board need to look at for how we fund sports, or are there gaps, or are there, you know, I know like there's times where I think boosters have funded maybe the assistant coach, but, you know, and I don't mean for people have different opinions, but maybe the district should be doing everything they can to fund the sports at a base level, and boosters are there for extras. So like, is there something we're missing? I don't know, because we've never really done a deep dive on athletic funding. So I think it's interesting regardless.
So do we want to plan for the June meeting to
That
have
would be-
a
yeah.
discussion around equity and athletics, and we can slice and dice?
Yeah, that would be helpful
The
for us.
data.
Jim, do you feel like that is something we can,
The financial discussion and audits, do you want to do the full discussion and audit, or?
it's up to-
I think we can plan for a longer meeting and do both. My guess is when we have the discussion around athletics, it's going to prompt more questions that's going to require follow-up. So I think if we, what do you think?
I think we can start the discussion and audit.
Yeah.
I think that'll work.
Yeah,
I actually have a question. Is it just uniforms you're looking at, or some fields need more work than others? So
Right,
I don't know
absolutely.
how that works.
No, it's spending across the board, and field maintenance is one of the things that we focused on a lot this year. So it's across the board.
Yeah, I was gonna kind of say similarly, it's not just about the money. It might be access to fields, to access to equipment.
Yeah.
Time spent.
Ratios of coaches.
Quality,
Yeah.
Time and
quantity.
The
So
quality
that-
of the experience.
Right.
You said it before, to what extent
Yeah.
are we able to fund what people need?
Yeah.
And I don't, that's kind of a, you know, it's a little nebulous term, but I think that's what we're trying to get at, making sure people have what they need.
So access to fields and stuff, though, can we not do that at this one? Okay, can we just stick to the money for now?
I think, I was gonna say, I think that would be very hard to quantify.
Yeah.
But it's an important thing to consider.
Well, also too, I mean, let's say I'm a modified parent, right? My kids play modified. I want my child to play on the varsity field, right? Because they need to be there. But the varsity, no, we get varsity first. So it also might be a perception, right? My kids should have the best field that they are. Well, they'll get that when they're seniors.
well, I think it's
Yeah.
also scheduled.
That's
Yeah,
another
right.
issue. So,
That's another
but if we stick with money for now
First.
and allocations, I'd rather, like when you said the other stuff, I go, oh my gosh, that's way too daunting for me to even contemplate.
I'm curious as to how the pool is going to be amortized against the use of it for the swim team versus for
That's been an
other
age-old,
things. So,
yeah.
yeah,
I was hoping not to get quite that granular. But
granular in a pool.
Good. I think that gives us a better understanding, so where we can go.
Okay.
Swim out of it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was
Don't
doing.
take that deep a dive.
Oh my gosh.
All right, anything else?
Thank you very much, though.
No, it just, I needed to better, Jim and I were trying to wrap our heads around it and we just, yeah, that's, I was like, wait, let's make sure where the board wants to go so we have an understanding.
I think if you were to explain to us, what the goal is,
Right.
and then what is the thinking process, the decision-making process as to allocation of resources to reach equity, that would be helpful.
It is, but I also, for me, it's important for me to be able to justify it and look at it. So if we're gonna have that
That's part of what-
conversation,
That's part of that conversation.
looking at the money, we'll say is, all right, are we doing what I said we're doing, right? So it's a good opportunity for us to
That's
really
the measure.
evaluate. Yep.
And you don't even have to call it equity, that might be a dangerous,
I think equity is a dangerous
yeah,
on that one.
I was just using that as a way to have the conversation.
Just spending.
Yes.
Spending, yes.
Just spending
It's a good word.
Athletic
Sound
spending.
fiscal spending.
Yes.
Okay.
How
We
would
won
you-
championships, by golly.
Oh my gosh.
Start doing some money ball.
All right, great.
How many dollars are we spending per point?
Petition to have.
Okay, that
signs.
concludes our agenda. We'll meet next, June 6th before our regular board meeting,
Which is gonna be June 9th.
June 9th.
June 9th, that one got switched.
So we should move
Audit.
audit to June 9th.
Yeah, it's just easier
Okay.
for everybody.
Great.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Archie, and thank you all for all your contributions, very
Good to
valuable.
see you, Rob.
Hey, can I have a motion to move into, well, regular session and then executive session?
I'll second.
Second? Okay, all in favor? We'll go
Aye.
to
Aye.
Mr. McCree's office. All right.
So we'll have.
Hold on.
June 9th.
It's already fine.
Still Monday, right?
No, it's